All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Let's get into that conversation. So 24 counties are staring at almost grinding to a halt in terms of not having the revenue that was allocated to them. The governors are saying they've been pushed to the wall. There's a lot of go-slow happening in Kisumu, Nakuru. And now joining me is our political editor, Francis Gachuri. Thank you so much for making time this morning, Francis.
Asante.
So now, what next now? Because that's what everybody is wondering. The National Assembly is on recess. Counties are grinding to a halt. So what happens from here?
Something must give. Yeah. And by giving, dialogue must be given an opportunity. And the grandstanding in the National Assembly and the Senate must ultimately come to a stop. Yeah. Because at the heart of this is not necessarily a row over division of money, but more so the supremacy contest between the National Assembly and the Senate.
Which is the bigger house.
Which is the bigger house and who has the final say. Yeah. I mean, it's also possible to see how much of a situation we are in, the crisis we are in, because in 2 months, we are talking about 2 bills, division of revenue bills, 2 in 2 months. The first one, the proposal was 310 billion shillings for county governments, but the Senate insisted on 335. Yeah. That matter was taken to a mediation where the two panels, the mediation, I mean the representatives from the 2 houses got into a stalemate because the Senate was insisting on 327 billion minimum. The National Assembly was insisting on 316 billion. So there was a difference of about 9 billion shillings or thereabout, 9 to 11 billion. So they couldn't agree, and that bill collapsed. And so a new bill is back in the House, the National Assembly this time saying 316.5 billion shillings, which is supported by the President and the National Treasury. Then the Senate has gone back to the original figure of 335 billion, which was recommended by the Commission for Revenue Allocation, CRA. So now we are heading into a mediation with the 2 houses insisting on 335.6 for the Senate, 316.5 for the National Assembly. What is even difficult is that the 2 chambers of parliament are on a month-long recess. They come back to the House on 9th of September.
So we're talking a full month without any conversation.
The only reason why they can be recalled earlier is if the mediation panel agrees on a figure and the 2 houses are recalled to come and pass that bill so that eventually it can go to the president for assent, becomes law, so that now counties start receiving their revenue share in the 2019-2020 budget. But the situation
How likely is that though?
The situation is dire because listening to members of the National Assembly and the Senate, you hear a lot of brinkmanship, lots of grandstanding, very hardline stances by the 2 chambers. But what makes it even difficult is that it is not the parliamentarians who will suffer. It is the residents in the constituencies and the counties who will suffer. Why? Because it means counties cannot be able to spend for basic things like medicine. So that villager who goes to that clinic or health center in the village will not find medicine. Why? Because the counties cannot pay. It's that simple. The nurses who are supposed to serve people in local hospitals will not be at work. So it means basically while the grandstanding continues in Nairobi, the suffering will be felt at the very local level.
So the chest thumping is happening between the Senate and the National Assembly, and that grandstanding that you're talking about. The president pronounced himself very clearly, said, "Mimi sina pesa, mkate zenu alafu mpatieni pesa kwa counties." How come they don't seem to be reading from the same page? Who's fooling who here? Because you'd assume the legislature would know if the national government can spend or not.
Well, the president is saying what he believes his government has in terms of resources. But the governors are also insisting that if you reduce the amount of money they were to get in the last financial year, this financial year, compared to what they got in the last financial year, it will, as it were, make it difficult for them to implement their duties.
But where's the symphony, Gachuri? That's what I'm wondering. Should they have some coordination of some sort so that this county raises this amount, the national government can only give this much at this particular point? How come the governors don't see from the same perspective as the president, that it cannot raise that money now?
The scramble for these resources is an annual thing. Obviously, it's a money issue. So the national government wants to hold on to some, and the county governments want more. In fact, there's this question of how much should be allocated, because when you look at the Constitution, it has clearly stipulated what is devolved and what remains at the national level. But is the amount of money allocated to county governments commensurate to the functions that have been devolved? The amount of money that remains at the national level, is it commensurate with the functions that remain at the national government. So those are some of the discussions that ought to be held.
Yeah.
But more fundamentally, there ought to be maybe some change in the law, because how this standoff has escalated for 2 months now, heading into the 3rd month, is something that probably the drafters of the Constitution did not anticipate. For example, there isn't even a ceiling on how many times the Division of Revenue Bill can fail and be reintroduced in the House. If it fails this time, can it be reintroduced again? Yes, it will be. But in the meantime, the county governments continue to suffer. There have been attempts to try and maybe amend the law and try and resolve some of these things. The Budget Committee, chaired by Kimani Ichung'wah, prepared an amendment to the Public Finance Management Act of 2012. That bill proposes that county governments, in the event of a standoff between the National Assembly and the Senate, they can get the 15% that is guaranteed in the Constitution from the Consolidated Fund. They get that 15% as they wait for the National Assembly and the Senate to sort out their issue. Because obviously the money is going to increase if they were to resolve it. But that 15%, they are assured based on the last audited accounts. If that principle was to be applied now, county governments would get about 160 billion shillings or thereabout as they wait for the National Assembly and the Senate to get their act together. But does it have to get there? I don't think so, because the drafters of the Constitution expected that the implementers of this Constitution would be sane and reasonable people who do not have to quarrel all the time in terms of who gets what, who doesn't get what. Because at the end of the day, this money doesn't belong to the national government. It doesn't belong to the national treasury. It belongs to the taxpayers of the Republic of Kenya. And so if you're quarreling, then it means you're making them suffer.
And Francis, before we wind up, because we are running out of time here, should there be a reprioritization of some sort? Because we can see 24 counties haven't paid, around 23 have managed to pay. What is so different between these 23 and the other 24? Should the struggling counties be helped more? Is it a matter of management? Is it a governance issue? What's going on there?
You see, the counties that have been able to pay, we must also remember that counties don't have the same ability in terms of raising revenue. For example, you cannot compare a county like Elgeyo Marakwet, where John Wanyama was a short while ago, to Nairobi or Mombasa or Narok. There are some counties that will, because of their infrastructure and because of the resources that they have, they are able to raise more revenue than other counties. And while this revenue is not spent at source, it goes to the controller of budget for approval before it comes back. There are some counties that will at all times have some reservoir in terms of the resources, but there are counties that will suffer big time in the event there is a standoff in terms of revenue sharing like we have currently. So maybe there is need, first of all, to cost functions. For example, how much does health cost annually? So that even as you allocate money, you are allocating money with a specific data in mind. How much does it cost to do roads? How much does it cost to do agriculture?
Even recurrent expenditure,
costing of functions.
So
that as you take this money to counties, as you keep some money at the national level, you know exactly what it is meant for. Because it is unbelievable that workers will go without salaries, yet you're expecting the same workers to offer services. A friend of mine was telling me they have gone for the inter-county games in Kericho. They're calling it, I think, Kikoska. Some have even gone there and they were told, nyinyi endeni, mtajisort. So how do they survive? How do they sleep? What do they eat? And they're going to compete on behalf of their counties. So it means probably there's a need for reprioritization in terms of allocation. But more fundamentally, we must also keep insisting on prudent management of resources that are devolved. Because while counties are complaining that they don't have sufficient resources, we're also getting reports of huge thievery of this money. And so it also makes it an easy case for the national government to say these counties don't deserve more money because they're stealing more. That's also notwithstanding the fact that there's also a lot of money that is also lost in national government. But when this money is not prudently managed in county governments, probably it gives the national government ammunition to say they don't deserve more. Yet they do, because services are required at the very low level.
Francis Gachuri, a political editor, thank you so much for making time. We'll see if something gives, like you said. We'll hold on to that and see what happens. We're taking a quick break here on Daybreak. When we come back, we'll be